Hi there, welcome to the E-commerce Nurse podcast, our 21st episode. I'm Karina McLeod, ex-Amazonian consultant and founder of E-commerce Nurse and Vendor Society. Today we're going to be talking about how to start a business with just one dime. We have a special guest, Seth Kniep, co-founder and CEO of Just One Dime, who manage Amazon accounts on behalf of businesses and have trained more than 10,000 entrepreneurs in over 150 countries to date, many of whom are multi-millionaires today. So hi Seth, a big thank you for taking the time to come on our show today. I'm super excited to hear your story. We briefly touched on it when we spoke initially, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about how you got started.
Thank you so much for having me on, Karina. Very excited to be here, and I hope you're enjoying your day in the beautiful UK.
We've actually had blue sky today, although it's cold. We've got blue sky.
As I've told you, anytime you're having a cloudy day, just give me a call and I'll take a picture of the blue sky for you here in Texas and I'll send it to you so you don't forget what it looks like.
Don't forget, yeah, that's what we'll be thinking when it comes January, when we're right in the middle of peak winter. So your story is very interesting in that you are a successful entrepreneur, but that doesn't mean that you started with a huge amount of funds to start your business. So it'll be fantastic if you could tell us about your story. And I'm sure I'm going to be asking lots of questions along the way, but just to understand, how did you actually get started?
Yes, I started with one dime, 10 cents. And a lot of people say, why did you start with a dime? Couldn't you started with $10 or $100? And I'm sure it could have, found a way to do that. But in my mind, because the dime is the greatest of value coin for its size in the United States currency, it symbolized something to me, that you can start with something very small and grow it into something very huge. And I think as humans, I almost said Americans, but I'm sure it happens in the UK as well, we underestimate the value of something small. Sort of like when you go to buy your next coffee and they're charging, £5 or £6 for a complicated cup of coffee and there's extra change. We just kind of throw it in the coin tray and forget about it and just kind of assume that, well, I'll never really be wealthy. I'll just keep working my job. I'll never really have a very, we resign ourselves to that kind of thinking. And I had to change it. One of the biggest changes I had to undergo, Karina, is I needed to change. I needed, from the inside out, my perspective on money and life and how it works had to change. And I just want to take, 10 seconds to share for anyone who thinks that the majority of entrepreneurs have it easy, or someone just wrote them a big fat check, or they inherited it. As there's this going thing here in the US, like, oh yeah, most wealth is inherited because your parents were fat, rich, and happy. It's not true. The vast majority of wealthy people started with very little. You look at Jack Ma, you look at Steve Jobs, you look at so many people who were successful, they started with little. And I think that's almost become a qualification for growing wealth, because I can't learn to manage the 100 million of revenue we currently manage as a team for other Amazon sellers today if I couldn't learn how to manage 10 cents. And to grow that by doubling it 20 times.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting because actually when people look at successful entrepreneurs, everyone sort of looks at where they are today and don't ever sort of really think about where they started from day one. And a lot of people use, as you say, it's that mindset, it's that excuse, as in, often it's that mindset of fear of failure or limited self-belief, and most people will use that excuse as in, I have no funds. It'll be great, but I have no funds. And the amount of times you hear that from people, that they just find every excuse under the sun to avoid really fulfilling what could be a dream of theirs.
Yeah, and I think you really nailed it on the head, Karina, because you said, I have no funds, right? And that's an excuse. And you also said they're afraid to fail. So by saying I have no funds, it's a convenient excuse so I don't have to face the fact that the real issue is not a lack of money, because we can find ways to get money if we want to, especially in societies that lean more towards capitalism, where you can go out and start a business and make a profit. I was just talking to my son and business partner today. Each day we go on a walk or two, and I was saying, wow, like we are so blessed. You could literally go to the corner right here on the street and start selling hot tea or cocoa and make money if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And no one's going to shut you down. Like you literally could do, I mean, I get it, COVID restrictions, maybe, I don't know if it worked the same way in the UK. But my point is the opportunity is so great. But I think you're right. People are afraid to fail. And I think we're taught to be afraid to fail because you go to school, you go to high school, grade school, and what are you taught? Don't fail on the test. And so we are averse to failure instead of realizing that failure is actually the only way forward. That's actually how we grow. How many toddlers have you seen that learned to walk by just one day they got up and they walked? They fell 100 times, and when they're struggling to get back up, they're learning something. It is natural to fail so that we can grow.
Yeah, and it's interesting as a society, we do play, and I think this definitely comes from the education system in the UK, is that it's always focusing on what you're not good at. And it's always about how you improve, and it's almost installed, and then you focus on that, whereas you don't focus on your qualities.
Yes.
And so that almost creates that kind of mindset, as in you don't want that fear of failure, because you're not trusting yourself completely, because you've never really had that huge pat on the back that said, you know what, you're fantastic at all of these. It's always been, oh, well, you're great, but let's improve on all of these. And some people get fixated on improvement all the time, which is great. As individuals, we're on a journey, and we always, as I always say, be a better version of yourself. But at the same time, you have to look at those qualities from within as well.
Yep, absolutely. And that's why I love to tell people when they say, well, what is it like to be a millionaire? And I tell them it's no different. The only difference is I have to grow up on the inside to get to that point. And it's actually harder to keep money than it is to make money. You know, we had the opportunity to interview Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank at his condo in Florida last year. And one of the first questions I asked him is, I said, I'm sure everyone asks this question, but I got to ask it. What's your net worth? And he started laughing. He's like, I'm not going to tell you that. He's like, all these people are guessing. Yeah. And I said, okay. He goes, well, Seth, here's the thing. He said, the most important thing is not how much money you make, but how much money you keep. And then he went on to elaborate how in order to manage money well, that requires delayed gratification. That requires an understanding of one's own heart temptations and being able to manage one's own heart instead of just letting an impulse or feeling lead you. You know, I was listening to another podcast this morning with Jocko, and he talks about how, you know, someone started criticizing him because he said something about stifling your feelings. And he goes, look, he says, I'm not saying you should suppress your feelings. Feelings are important.
Yeah.
When it comes to the petty ones, the petty impulses, the little things that we get so outraged about, the just little inconveniences, it's like, it's time we grow up. You want to grow and be successful? It begins with the person in the mirror. I can't blame my mom, my dad, my economy, whoever's president of the United States, whoever's prime minister of the UK. Like, I can't blame those things.
Yeah.
I still am free to choose what I choose. And the biggest person, the only person that's really going to get in the way of me and succeeding is Seth Kniep.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's completely true. Completely true. And I see that, you see that all around you. And it starts from within. So with that, with your journey then, so you started off, what were you starting off and where to get to where you are now?
Yeah. So I started with a dime. I came up with this idea. If I double it 20 times, it'll grow past $100,000. So I just started walking around downtown asking random people, and they would say, why do you want me to double your dime? And I would share my story and my vision. Now, someday I want to be able to give other people hope, because I'm struggling. I know a lot of people are struggling, and they're tired of the 9-to-5 corporate feel, and they want to do something that creates freedom so they can have margin to do the things they love with the people that they love. So just for asking, I got my dime all the way to $400. Now, if you double the dime exactly, it won't get exactly to 400. So at one point, I just rounded it up. And just to keep it simple. And each evening when I would come home, I would stick it in an envelope and put it in a little drawer next to my desk. And my son would follow me around with an iPod at the time with a really bad camera. And we documented every single double so people someday could see how we did it. Once I got to $400, I took that and I purchased cremation urns on DHgate, which is a sourcing website, sort of like Alibaba, but a little more automated than Alibaba.
Yeah.
And I started to list those on eBay. They didn't sell very well. I was very discouraged, like one a week, maybe two the next week. Definitely not enough to fire my boss. So then I said, well, why not list these on Amazon? Now at that time, Karina, I didn't understand differentiation. I didn't understand why my product has to stand out from the competition, especially when it has no reviews, in order for someone to actually buy it or to even get a click-through rate. I didn't understand that. I was kind of lucky in the sense, I don't believe in luck, but I will share this. No one else had that particular model listed on Amazon. Cremation urns were growing. I knew that. I did my research, but I didn't understand differentiation. And because my model was different, it began to sell very quickly. And then when I sent them into Amazon's fulfillment center, because I moved from fulfilled by merchant to fulfilled by Amazon, so they would fulfill the orders for me, that's when it really picked up, because now it had that Prime badge that helps with trust and conversion. That's when we started making serious money. And it got up to $100 a day. And I would take all the profits and I would buy more and I would buy more and just kept reinvesting. And that's when I said, okay, something amazing is happening here. And then I started using those funds to buy other products. We started getting into the toy category. We started getting into the clothing. Back then, clothing was gated, but eventually they ungated it for us. They started getting into the kitchen category, sporting and outdoor goods category, home improvement category, some lawn tools, and just started expanding. And what drove me at the beginning was not any particular brand. What drove me was, what are products that people want? How can I, and I learned this as I went, how can I make my product better in some way? And it has to be in a way that's, you can visually see it, because the customer can't use the product or smell it or taste it or hold it until they receive it. So that main photo has to show how it's better, how it's different. And how do I know what they want? Well, I just read the critical reviews of all the top competitors. And that's how we began to build wealth selling on Amazon. And that's when it just really started to take off.
Yeah, that's awesome. And and the key thing there as well, as you say, it's not, and this is what we find with some businesses, is that they can be very focused on profit at the start. But actually what you're doing is you're investing long term, you're investing in a business, and the sales that you're getting, you're putting back in to buy more inventory and to, as you say, going into different product areas and different niches, as it were, and really mastering it. So before you sold on Amazon, did you have any idea? Did you have to just kind of learn from scratch in terms of all the different strategies?
Yep. I didn't know anything about online selling. I had never sold anything online in my life other than a guitar, and that was through eBay and back in the old bidding style. So I knew nothing. Nothing of entrepreneurialism other than running a few garage sales when I was a kid. So I didn't know. So I just had to learn. So I started studying. I started looking for ebooks, started listening to podcasts. And back then, there was a lot less information. Probably 70 to 80% of what I learned by making mistakes. I learned by messing up. I'll just share one example with you. So when we first started selling this product that was doing really well, we had a product inspection on it before we started selling it. And it costs around $200, $250, where a company goes to China, they look in the factory at the product, and they will check one out of every 5 products. So off the assembly line, you're getting a good sample across the board. And we tell them exactly what to look for. They send us videos, they send us an inspection report, they send us photos, so we can validate, okay, this product is good. When our inventory began to run low, we needed to go make a second order. I thought, I'll save $200, $250. I'm not going to worry about a product inspection. Big mistake. I didn't realize the supplier on the second batch used an inferior material. So when we had these products sent into Amazon's fulfillment center and they started to sell, we started getting A to Z claims. We started getting credit card chargebacks for fraud. We started getting all these complaints and bad reviews. And Amazon sent us a notification, said your account is at risk of being shut down.
Wow. And
that's when I realized me saving $200 to $250 to get, to speed things up actually cost me closer to $20,000 when all was said and done. And so that's just an example of many mistakes I made along the way that helped me to realize, Seth, you have to do it right. And you can't assume. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make in business is they assume. And you never assume, you always have to test. And being sort of a by nature optimistic, glasses half full kind of person, that comes with a cost. You can't assume that everything's going to go great just because that's your personality. You have to test it. And I've had to learn through many trial and error, you have to test it. And so that's just one of the many errors I made. But looking back, I thank God for it, Karina, because had I not gone through that, I wouldn't treasure the value of testing so much. Yeah. And that's actually grown me as a person. And I think that's the other benefit. Being an entrepreneur isn't just to create wealth. It's so we can grow as individuals, as humans. And you cannot put a price tag on that.
Yeah, completely. And it's a roller coaster ride, right? You know, that's what I always say to people when they're like, how are things? And you're like, it's a roller coaster. Those ups are amazing. But you know, that things are going great, but you've got to be ready for those crashes, and that just happens. But you've got to not let it get you down or make you want to give up. And I guess, how do you find that? I mean, those times where there's some times where you just feel you're being slapped left, right, and center, and things are just like constantly against you. How do you persevere through that? Because some of those knockbacks can be pretty harsh, and you've just got to keep going.
Absolutely. And thanks for asking that. I think something every entrepreneur struggles with is sometimes it's lonely because you're selling online and you are separated from everyone else and you have your own unique vision. So even though entrepreneurs can unite and encourage each other, each person has their own niche and they're so busy, it's hard to find time to sit down and just hang out with other entrepreneurs like we're doing right now. I think that's one of the biggest challenges. So what I will do when I start having those negative feelings or negative thoughts is I will imagine that there's a chair next to me and my feelings are sitting in that chair. And I take time to listen to those feelings as objectively as I can, not put judgment on them, not critique them, not question them, just listen to what they're saying.
Yeah.
And what that does is it helps me to realize that those feelings are not bad. And if I let them lead me, if I let them control me or dictate what I do, that can be very bad.
Yes.
But they're feelings and they're there for a reason. They're actually gifts.
Yes.
Signals that maybe there's some things I need to change, or it could just be a phase or a season, a down point before the up point. Yeah. And so what that does is it allows me to just calm down, not get too worried about it, see my feelings over here, speak truth to myself, and then move on. So that's one thing. Second is I go on walks. Going on walks is huge because it allows me to get away from everything. Yep. Allows me to think. It allows me to pray. It allows me to think about the future. It allows me just to get away and be by myself with my dog, sometimes my business partner, sometimes my wife, and just have that time to recuperate. Yeah. And it's almost become a ritual for me now. So when I come back in, I'm refreshed. It's like when I go on a walk, I've trained my brain. It's like a trigger to put everything to the side and just enjoy this walk for its own sake. There was one day I'm on a walk and fall had begun a few weeks back. And I noticed how good it smelled outside. I just noticed, like, wow, like the scents that are coming off, creation and all the nature around me is amazing. I was like, I never even stopped to really think about how amazing and beautiful it is. I had to get out of the office to experience that. Yeah. So I also work out. You had mentioned boot camp. I worked out very hard. This morning, got up at 5:30 after I ate breakfast. We have a dojo at home where I work out in, and I work out very hard. And that really, really helps me because it's not just taking care of my body, but I feel like if I can conquer myself in the gym or the dojo, I can handle any obstacle I'm going to face in the day. It sets me up right. Completely. But I will say it's not really cold outside where I'm doing it. It's in my nice warm dojo.
No, but it's true. It's true. That's why a lot of people say, why do you train out in the cold? And as I said, I've started to open water swimming out in the cold sea. But it's the mental part that says if you can do a lot of that, you can cope with a lot more. And it's kind of mentally training your brain. You mentioned something really interesting there, was about sitting down next to your emotions and your feelings. And it's the fact that you recognize that you can stop and do that and take yourself out, because it's that whole thing of when you start feeling getting those negative thoughts, you start your brain, or with my brain, goes a bit overactive.
Totally.
And trying to know when to say stop, and knowing that you're getting like that, to then sit back and then reflect and say, well, hang on,
Yeah.
you feel this happening, that I need to take a step back and see what's going. And I think that's a fine art. And you don't, because you see many people that are in the same rut. They're always stressed. Work's always terrible. Everything's terrible. Everything's against. But until you stop and learn that, no, this isn't okay. These feelings are okay to have, but I need to deal with them as well and not ignore them. They're there for a reason. And I like the way you say that you talk and you kind of evaluate it all, because that's something that's really, really vital.
Yeah. The first time I shared this on a podcast, Karina, it was so funny. The person just kind of looked at me and did not know how to respond. Like, what are you talking about? And I said, listen, you're exactly right. It is an art. It is a craft. It's not something you're born with and one day you just know what to do. I had to be taught this. I had to learn how to do this. And I think it is so important, because instead of me always being in my feelings and on the roller coaster of what they're doing, I'm actually able to take ownership for them, not suppress them, not run away from them, just sit with them. And it's amazing how much better you feel afterwards. It really is self-care. And it's all up here. It, like, the brain and the emotions are so powerful. And when you do that, it frees you, I believe, to live to so much more potential. I believe, Karina, if humans knew how much potential they really have,
completely,
even us, I think we still underestimate our potential. Our world would be amazing. Like, there are amazing things in our world, not saying everything's all gloom and doom, but if people understood how great their potential is and then believed it, there would be a lot more courageous actions going on. And I think entrepreneurs, in a sense, are leading that. They're showing the world you can do more, because most people, they're not just born an entrepreneur, given all the training and off they go. They had to find a very difficult path. They had to swim over the river, across the mountain, to get to a point where they're actually changing their life. And the money was a means to an end. It never was the end goal.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think it's also down to motivation and what is your motivator. Sometimes I speak to people that are like, oh, I just want to own my own business. I want to be this entrepreneur. I want to get X amount of dollars or pounds. And the end goal is so money orientated and focused. And things never happen. I mean, it's great to have those motivators, and everybody wants to earn some, but if that's your only core motivator and it's nothing about you individually growing, then it's going to be a tough journey for sure.
100% agree. Because what happens if your end goal is money, what happens along the way when you lose money? Now your motivation is gone. But if the motivation was, I want to create freedom so I can do the things I love with the people I love, that motivation's still there. Money or not, obstacles or not, bumps in the road or not, I'm going to still keep going, because that's where I'm trying to get to. And then money becomes a byproduct that allows you to do those things versus the end goal that we bow down and worship.
Yeah, completely. I've always gone for freedom. So it's good to hear somebody else mention that as well, as that's, the biggest goal in life for me is freedom. And then, so you are where you are now, and of course we spoke about the dime. The challenges that you face today, are they the same challenges that you faced almost on day one, or are you facing completely new challenges now? You have such responsibility and compared to what you had at the start.
So some of the challenges are the same, and then there's new ones as well. So I'll give you an example. So back in the past, when we were just starting and I was thinking, hey, I want to get into real estate, I wanted to break into it, but I didn't have enough to go out and buy a house with cash. And I didn't have good enough credit to get a loan. So I thought, how do I break into this? Well, then I realized I needed about $2,500 up to $3,000 to pay for the first and last month rent on a condo, so I could lease it out under the permission of the landlord, which I later discovered HOA doesn't favor that all too much. I'm sure you guys have the same thing in the UK. So for me, that was a huge obstacle in my mind. If I need $2,500, $3,000 just aside, how do I do that? For me, that was a big obstacle. Today, we just, 2 days or 3 days ago, we just closed on Monday on a new property that will be closer to 4.5 million for our new Just When I'm offices and coffee shop. That was an obstacle to me. So my point is, the problems are similar, but the mental perspective has changed. So what used to be a huge problem to me has become less. Now, someone might say, well, Seth, you have a lot more wealth now, so of course it's not a big of a problem. But if I can remind people, it's perspective. Perspective changes. Even if I had the same amount of money back then or way less today, I still would view it differently. So for example, let's say we launch a new product and it fails. And it doesn't happen nearly as often as it did before, but it still happens. I don't get nearly as discouraged or distraught over it.
Yeah.
Because I know I'm going to find a way through. I know what to do. And I've trained myself not to be all dramatic about it. You know what I mean? Whereas in the past, it was a bigger deal.
Yeah.
However, some of the bigger problems that we've run into, especially in early 2019, is learning how to find the right staff. And making sure we had enough time to invest in them. And in early 2019, we really struggled with this. In fact, my son, Josiah, who's a business partner with me, we did a whole podcast on this, on our podcast, talking about what were the struggles.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, we hired over 20 people in less than 3 weeks.
Wow.
Not suggested, especially if you don't have experience doing that. And that was, I ended up in the hospital from stress. I was perfectly healthy, but I ended up there just because, and I didn't realize I was stressed. I didn't even know, Karina, but it was just so difficult. So looking back, what have I learned? Well, now we have amazing staff who are doing a fantastic job. Have there been bumps? Of course. Have we had to fire a few people or go through some conflicts with people? Of course. People are people and that's expected. But now it's become a source of joy for us versus a source of stress. Now, are there stressful moments? Yes, naturally. I think people are the most wonderful thing and the most heartbreaking thing on planet Earth. But that's why they're wonderful, is because they matter. People, I believe, are eternal. People you can't put a price tag on the life of a human. So learning how to find the right staff, learning how to train them, the mistake we made was we didn't vet the staff well in 2019 that we were going to hire. And we ended up with some that if looking back, we never would have hired.
Yeah.
Additionally, we didn't have enough time to train them to give them the tools they needed to be successful at what they do.
Yes.
And so that was probably one of the hardest challenges I went through professionally and personally in growing Just One Dime as a coaching company that's now reaching people in over 150 countries. But if people could sit in on the inside and see the tears and the heartache and the stress and the lack of sleep and all those to get there, it might scare them. But Karina, I wouldn't exchange it for anything, because as a result, it's not a huge obstacle. Is it a challenge? Yes. And I love challenge, but it's no longer a heart-wrenching challenge. It's a motivating challenge to me now to find the right people to build a company with, people that you want to grow with for years.
Yeah, definitely. And I hear that. I remember the days of that very first hire and being really afraid of that first hire. And then all of a sudden having to then, you're hiring more resource and you're comfortable with that. But then the new challenge is, well, how do you scale up on that? And then, and where do you hire? Where do you focus that resource? So it's interesting. It's kind of like there's always a new, as you say, new challenge. And as people don't see the tears and the stress that goes onto it, but there's always light, as you say. You go through that, but then you go through a positive stage at the end that, you have to go through those hard times to get through, to get that light at the end as well. And then you're on as I say, the whole roller coaster, isn't it? That you're then completely, it's the ups and downs. And so, with that, do you ever feel like when it gets on top of you, you want to just escape and run through it all and think, why did I do this in the first place? With that time when you felt stressed, ended up in the hospital. It's
total transparent answer. I never have.
That's awesome.
I never have. Yeah. And I don't think lowly of anyone who has. I think it's natural. I think it's partly my personality and nature is when I see a challenge, It makes me want to fight harder, even if it kills me. So I'm the, you know, they say there's fight and there's flight. I'm definitely fight.
Yeah.
Like if there's a conflict, I'm like, let's face it on, let's put on the boxing gloves, let's go. That's my nature. So that comes with its costs.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've never been in a mental state where I just felt like, man, did I make the wrong decision? I mean, little decisions, yes, but as far as becoming an entrepreneur, selling in Amazon, building a team, starting in real estate, I haven't. Like I wouldn't trade this for anything. And I think part of it is I started so much later in life than other people do. So I was in my mid 30s, early to mid 30s, like 33, 34 when I started.
Yeah.
Today, when I started thinking about it, today I'm 42. So I had been through enough life to know I did not want the old life anymore.
Yeah.
I didn't. Like it would even I would rather have a stressed out entrepreneur life, building wealth, learning and growing, even if it was a lot of heartache, and it's not a lot of heartache, it's some, but it's not a lot.
Yeah.
Than I would feeling like a drone,
Yeah.
you know, feeling like I'm just following what society has told me I'm supposed to do versus doing what my heart really dreams to do. And that's why when we hire people, we really try to understand what is their passion. Because I do not want, you want to know what my greatest fear is, Karina? It's recreating the same scenario for my team that was created for me back when I worked at Apple. Apple's a great company, but my manager and my department made my life miserable.
Yeah.
So I don't want to recreate that. So that's why we constantly try to understand what is that staff member's passion. You know, someone, if their gift and their skill is to write copy and I can get them to do that, the majority, for me, that's a win. If someone's skill is to do video cameras and recording and I can get them to do that, that's a win. I want to place people where their passions are.
Yeah.
When I worked at Apple, I felt, and again, I'm not criticizing the company and I'm not afraid to, you know, by the way, but my particular manager took no concern to understand what I cared about. And I never felt like I could contribute.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes I almost wish more people could have been in that situation so they could understand how cool is it when you do get to be in a place where you can actually influence the direction of a really phenomenally fast growing company, you know, because I know what that's like.
Yeah.
And that was our biggest hesitation in not hiring. And then when we decided to do it, we're like, well, let's just hire a bunch. We went a little too fast, but I learned a lot too.
Yeah, but it is important. I mean, there's so many times if you've been, I know from previous jobs where you're being pulled in the wrong direction. And, you know, I've had that even with my team, as in, I'm like, something's not working here. And then you have that conversation and say, what do you actually love about your role? And, you know, it takes time for people to actually really be truly open and say, to understand what their motivators. And then because you think somebody's great at something, and they might be great at that, doesn't mean it's their passion. And so, you know, I've done that before where I've pushed someone down a path because they're great at it. But turns out they're great at it, but they don't like it. They're uncomfortable with it. And it's not about uncomfortable to get comfortable. They just don't have that passion. And as soon as you then shift that direction, and then they start focusing on their passion, completely different, right?
And it's hard. And you're right. It's hard for them sometimes to share that because they don't want to put their position at risk. So you really have to get them to get comfortable. Tell me how you're doing. Like, how can I support? Where do you see yourself a year from now, 2 years, 3 years? Yeah. Totally understand that.
Yeah, definitely. So you've created then your own company culture, I guess, through experiences that you have had in the past has enabled you to create a culture that embeds elements of your, to some extent, your personality, but also sort of what you felt didn't work in the past.
Yeah. And I've had to be careful not to make it a swing the other direction, which we started to at the beginning, where it's like, you know, the department I worked in was so corporate. Well, let's be anti-corporate. That's that can actually be a very toxic way to build a company. So I had to go back and think about the first half of my time at Apple was fantastic. The sales department treated me well. I was doing something I enjoyed and was good at. There was a lot of training. There was feedback. There was class. I mean, it was so healthy. So I think the contrast actually shocked me when I moved to a different department and everything was just very drab, to use an English word.
We can use that one.
Okay. I think it's the first time I've ever used that word, Karina. So
There
thank
we
you.
go. You can learn more British words as we go.
True. This is true. Yeah. So I think it was hard not to swing the other direction, because I don't want to identify our culture by what we're not. I also identify by what we are. So it's taken me many months to appreciate all the great things I did learn from Apple.
Mhm.
I'm not anti-big company.
Yeah.
I mean, I benefit from selling on a big company, Amazon. And it's funny, there's this trending thing going around saying, don't buy an Amazon, don't support them, they're evil. I'm like, are you kidding me? Do you realize you are supporting the vast majority of their sales, over 50%, are from third-party sellers, small businesses? Do you
Exactly.
realize what you're saying?
Yeah. That makes me smile. Is that, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so it's taken time, and we're still figuring it out.
Yeah.
We haven't figured it out yet, but we still are. We have core values that when we onboard people, that we go through.
Yeah.
And what are the core values of who we are? And granted, our core values are not going to resonate with every person, and they shouldn't. It's like a family. Every family has their own culture, their own cheese factor,
Yeah.
their own uniqueness and eccentricity. And that's perfectly okay. I think it should be like that. That's what makes each family or each company unique. But it has taken us time to figure out, what did I learn from Apple, but also what is true of us that will never be true of Apple, because this is who we need to be based on who we are and the kind of customers we are serving.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. I completely go with that. I mean, we're a team of well, mainly ex-Amazonians, so we've gone with the Amazon kind of fast culture.
Yeah.
But actually it's about installing that, but making sure you have that work-life balance, because most people that I know that have spent years at Amazon all went through burnout. There's only a certain amount that you can give constantly. People have been there 10 years or more. Fantastic. I always think, how have they managed that? That's awesome, because I definitely 7 years and we were out. So no, that's awesome to hear. And so, and talking about sort of where you came from, the start of from one dime, if you were to give, like, from that one dime to where you are now, 5 tips of of your journey to somebody, or to those listening, because they'll think, okay, I've got that dime, I'm going to invest it, I'm going to buy some stock, I'm going to find that niche. But how are those steps from you being from that one dime to being a multi-millionaire? I said multi, I meant multi.
Nice. I think we say both here in the US, honestly. And you have to give yourself credit. English, we learned our English from the UK. So granted, yours goes back a little further.
Yeah, so multi-millionaire. Yeah, if you could give some tips along that journey, that would be awesome for our listeners.
Absolutely. So the first thing I would say is move to action quickly. Once you know something is the right decision for you, you're going to have fear, you're going to have questions, you're going to have a lot of unknowns, and there will be risk. I mean, there's risk even in relationships. When, let's say, you need to confront a partner about something, there's risk. We don't know how they'll react. Parenting a child, there's risk. Having a dog has risk. I don't know of a single thing on planet Earth that people have done that is reputable, that is amazing or applaudable, if that's a word, that didn't have some risk in it. So the first thing I would say is move to action quickly.
Yeah.
It's okay. And then the second I would say is it's okay to make mistakes along the way. I mean, just as a toddler had to fall many times to walk, well, we also have to fall to learn new ways and new things.
Yep.
The third I would say is take ownership. Take ownership for your mess ups. One of the biggest challenges for me early on was taking ownership in my life, not just as a husband and a father, but in how I manage my money. I had to come to grips and realize that I pretty badly sucked at all three. So taking ownership, and it's hard because it means I have to say I'm not good in this area, but that doesn't mean I'm not a good person. And I think it's really hard to admit an area, a character defect, without believing that means I am a defect. Or it's hard for someone to say I made a mistake without saying I am a mistake. One does not mean the other. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so move to action quickly. What was the second one I gave you?
Take risks.
Hey, thank you. Take risks. Third, take ownership. Fourth, be teachable. There's the longer I've been an entrepreneur, the more success I've experienced, the more I realize how much I don't know.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think is awesome about what you do is you are helping people to learn things they don't know. And every podcast I'm on, I always ask myself this question: there's going to be something I'm going to learn from Karina today, because she knows things I don't know. And now I'm going to add that to my toolbox so I can grow as a person.
Completely.
And I think that's so important.
Yeah, definitely.
And then fifth, have fun. Don't take yourself too seriously. I think people get so caught up and so, oh, is this going to work? Oh, about my launch. Oh, no. Sometimes you need to just relax. I don't know if you drink or not. I'm not an alcoholic, but I drink sometimes. Yeah. Like I'll have rum in the evenings, on the weekends, watch a silly show. Last night we watched, it was really funny. We wanted to see Netflix released this new comedy thing.
Yeah.
It's so funny. They have Canadian humor, United Kingdom humor, American humor, and we're watching this Canadian guy. It was so funny. I'm laughing at his Canadian humor, not at the jokes, because Canadians, Americans are very different in some ways and very similar as people from England.
Oh my goodness.
Sometimes you just got to relax and not take yourself so seriously and just not make a huge deal out of everything, because life is too short. And I was listening to his podcast about the Navy SEALs, and a lot of people don't know this, but one thing they treasure is humor. And you never think of a Navy SEALs guy like this elite military laughing, but they do this because some days that's the only way they can get through the dark days, is having a sense of humor and just enjoying the life that you have. It shouldn't be all work. Sometimes you need to have a cup of tea. Sometimes you need to go for a run. Sometimes you need to go for a swim in your wetsuit.
Exactly. And no, I completely agree with all those 5. And I even sort of follow those, and, taking action and risk and ownership and teachable. I think that's a hard one. I found that one hard, is actually asking for help and thinking and saying, no, I don't know it all. Because you want to make it at start. It's like, yeah, I can answer all these questions. I'm consulting. They expect me to know everything. No, they don't. And you just put your hands up and say, actually, no, I don't. But, maybe I know somebody that does. And then, you learn. And as you say, have fun. As we say in the UK, we love a bit of banter. That's what we call it, banter.
You love a little banter?
Bit of banter. And so, when you go to the gym, or my group of boot camp buddies, it's just banter for an hour of just really bad jokes, but it's it makes the day, it softens that tough day. So it's great.
Totally. Absolutely.
Definitely. Awesome. Seth, you've been awesome. I could talk to you for so much longer. I think you've got a great story, and I just love your mindset and the way you look at things and your journey as well. So hopefully those that have been listening today have learned lots, and it's given you listeners, for some of you, hope in that, you can make those dreams happen. It does require perseverance. It does require those ups and downs, but it's definitely achievable. If you really want that in life, switch your mindset and you can really make those things happen. So thanks once again. Been fun. And hopefully we get to talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Karina. It's really nice to talk to you. And thanks for having me on the podcast.